Macentra. Macentra. Macentra today was on board. He's on board on a boat. I almost said pot. Please forgive me. Don't mind about it, alright? Let's see what today's offer, okay? Surprisingly, this boat leaves at 3:30 and time is 3:29 and few seconds. So almost leaving.
I'm aware, so I'm holding you.
And it's exactly 3:30 when the boat was leaving. Wow. Macentra on the lake. I don't know why they had to come back again. Let's see the art of God now on the lake. So make sure when you come to Canada, you have to come and sail through Lake Ontario. Very cool breeze, super good.
All right, guys, can you all hear me okay? Wonderful. Well, welcome aboard the OP. My name is Isabel, and I'm going to be your first maid and tour guide throughout the duration of this trip. But before I officially start, I do need to make a couple of safety announcements. At the very top of the OP, you'll notice that there are enough life jackets for everyone on board. At the very back of the boat and at the front, we have life rings and fire extinguishers. And then right here at the front, the top left side, there is an inflatable life platform. However, we won't have to use any of these devices as long as you guys follow the one very simple rule of the harbor today, and that is simply to stay inside the boat. Can you guys all do that for me today? Guys, there are 24 of you on board. I want to hear a yes from every single person. Can you do that for me today?
Yes!
Oh my goodness, so much better. Well, as I mentioned, my name is Isabel, and I'm going to be your first mate and tour guide. But there at the wheel, we have a much more important introduction to make. We have the woman, the myth, the legend, the very beautiful, the very talented Captain Amalia. She also happens to be my identical twin sister. So you guys are lucky enough to actually be part of our twin tour experience. Woo! Now coming up here on the right, we are seeing the first building of the Toronto waterfront. This beige and green structure is called the Queen's Quay Terminal. It was first built in 1917, and during that time it served as a dry and a cold goods warehouse. It is made entirely of poured concrete, which at the time helped to keep things insulated within the building. However, in the 1980s, it was entirely renovated, and now it is a home of more than 20 different restaurants and facilities on that lower level, more than 400,000 square feet of office space at the mid-level, and then at the very top, the part that you see entirely encased in green window panes, that is a home of 72 luxurious condo units. But this lovely waterfront that you guys all see here to the right was not always like this. In fact, if you happen to find yourself here in the early 20th century, you would most likely come here to party. No, not to party, you would have found that you had come to an industrial port. This meant the entirety of this area was covered with slaughterhouses, factories, and warehouses. There was a lot of pollution, a lot of smog in the air. It wasn't a very nice place to be. But then in the 1970s, the City of Toronto introduced the Waterfront Revitalization Project, where they essentially took all of these industries and they moved them to a different part of Ontario. So although the waterfront that we have here today is definitely a much lovelier place to be, there are still some vestiges of this industrial past. For instance, here we're coming upon that red brick building with a large smokestack. Does anyone want to guess what it was used for in its past? I'll give you a major hint. Simply read the side of the building. It was a power plant, exactly, guys. Note your questions on this harbor tour. Now, until about the 1980s, it was operational, and it supplied power to the Queen's Quay Terminal. But then in 1984, it was entirely cleaned and gutted, and now it is a home of a free contemporary art gallery. Not a lot of enthusiasm on any of your faces regarding the concept of free contemporary art. Oh, just one person? Well, you're unique here in the crowd, clearly. Well, if that's not really your thing, they also have the best AC and the cleanest washrooms in the harborfront, so maybe that's more up your speed. To the left of the power plant, we have that black, gray, and white building in the distance, and that is known as the Harborfront Center. In its past, it was a trucking garage, but now it is a place for artisans to come together to create art. They have glass blowing classes there, jewelry making classes, and my favorite, and something I've definitely indulged in, salsa dancing classes. Now you're probably noticing that white pedestrian bridge that we're coming upon here on the right. This is known as the Amsterdam Canal Bridge. It was gifted to the City of Toronto in 1974 by our former sister city. And if you guys happen to find yourselves in the City of Amsterdam, which was our former sister city, you'd find that they also have a Toronto Bridge in turn. Now, by far, my favorite fact about this bridge is that it was featured in a romantic comedy movie. Do we have any rom-com movie fans on board today? Anyone who loves a good romantic comedy? A couple of people? Mostly people that are shy to admit it. That's alright. I'm a self-professed rom-com fan. I absolutely adore them. And perhaps you may recognize our bridge from the movie My Big Fat Greek Wedding. Oh, suddenly more rom-com fans I see. That is where the two main characters, Ian and Tula, share their very first kiss on their first date in the movie. Aww, how romantic. Now, this filming history is actually quite prevalent here in the City of Toronto because next to Los Angeles and New York, we're the third largest in the entire world. This is largely due to the fact that we provide a stipend to foreigners to come and film here for a cheaper rate than they would in their home countries. So a lot of the movies and the shows that you may be familiar with, like Good Will Hunting, American Psycho, the show Suits, the show The Boys, and even My Big Fat Greek Wedding. They were all filmed here in the City of Toronto. Now, you probably see this here on our right, the two iconic structures of the Toronto City skyline. We have that tall, pointy concrete structure that we see that looks like a pencil. That is the CN Tower. And beside it to its left, we have that dome-shaped looking stadium, and that is the Rogers Center. Now I'll talk about the CN Tower a little bit later on when we all have a much better view of it. So for now, let's focus our attention to its much shorter and sadder neighbor there, the Rogers Center. Do we have any Toronto locals on board today? Anyone here from Toronto? All right, then I'll ask you this question. What was the stadium formerly known as? The Sky Dome, exactly. And I mean, it's a much more fitting name for it. If you look at the shape of the roof, it is shaped like a dome, and it fully retracts and opens up to the sky, hence its former name. However, in 2006, Rogers, a telecommunications company here in Canada, bought out the rights of the stadium and renamed it after themselves. So although a lot of locals, including Captain Amalia and myself, still lovingly refer to it as the Sky Dome, it is now officially coined as the Rogers Center. Now, what exactly is so unique about the Rogers Center here? Well, it actually has the world's first fully retractable stadium roof and first fully functional retractable stadium roof. Hold on, folks. I will remove that. Captain Amalia, could you slow down for just one instant here, please? Thank you.
Oh, this thing is so fun. Water coming from the lake. Very cool breeze.
All right, folks. Hopefully that makes it a little bit less flashy of an experience for everyone here on board. Now, the Rogers Center here is unique in the fact that it is the world's first fully functional retractable stadium roof. And I added the word functional in the mix because when it was first being built, the city of Montreal tried to beat us to the punch. However, what happened with Montreal's roof is that it opened exactly one time and then it never closed back down again. So the fact that ours here is still operational and functional is quite an important accomplishment. It takes about 20 minutes for it to fully open and to close, and about $20 worth of electricity. It is also the home of Canada's only Major League Baseball team, the Toronto Blue Jays. That is actually more enthusiasm than we normally get on any of these tours. Now, in the past, I would understand why they wouldn't get as much enthusiasm. They weren't doing so hot. But according to others that I've heard, they're doing fantastic this season, and they are in the #1 spot. So let's give some love to the Blue Jays. Woo! Now, me personally, I'm not the biggest sports fan out there, but I do enjoy supporting the Blue Jays on one particular day at the Rogers Center, and that is on Tuesdays because they have $1 hot dog days. That means that every hot dog in the premises is simply $1. Earlier on in the season, Captain Amalia and myself happened to find ourselves on one of these Tuesday baseball games, and between the two of us, we managed to eat 20 hot dogs. Can you guess how many Captain Amalia ate? 18 of them! She had to be rolled out of the stadium. But if you guys think this is a lot of hot dog eating, think again. The record was actually set a couple of Tuesdays ago, actually, for the most hot dogs consumed in a single Tuesday baseball game,
So you can
and it
enjoy the
currently
views
sits at 84,000 hot dogs. Now, to give you guys a little bit more context, the capacity of the Rogers Center is only about 40,000 people, so that's more than 2 hot dogs consumed per person in attendance. We sure love our hot dogs here in the city of Toronto. Now, here on the right, we are seeing the first of the 15 islands, and this is known as Airport Island. It is the home of Billy Bishop International City Airport. It is the airport that has one of the smallest runways here in Canada, only about 1 kilometer long, whereas at a normal airport you find that the shortest runway is only 4 kilometers, so very small. Although it is, a small airport, it is quite popular, although the flights mostly go to domestic places across Canada or to places on the eastern coast of the U.S. Of the 15 islands, Airport Island is the only one that was made artificially by man. It was made through the process of dredging, which essentially just means digging up all the soil and the sand from the bottom of the lake, clumping it all up together, and that's how the land formation that we have here was created and formed. Now, because of this, sometimes it's not considered to be part of the official Toronto Islands, but I still consider it to be part of the official Toronto Islands. Coming here on our left, we're seeing another one of the Toronto Islands. This is Muggs Islands. And then here, directly on our right, we are seeing Hamlin's Point. The rest of the islands we'll be seeing today are all naturally occurring based on a series of sandbanks. Now, I'll talk about Muggs Island a little bit later on, so for now, let's focus here on the right to Hamlin's Point. Now, this Hamlin's Point was first established by Europeans in the 1860s, and in particular, the Hamlin's family. And they were quite entrepreneurial because they established Toronto's very first entertainment district, and here they had it all. They had bars, restaurants, hotels, casinos, amusement parks, and even a circus. This was definitely the place you wanted to come to in the 1880s if you wanted to have a good time in the city of Toronto. Now, the peak of this entertainment district definitely came in around the 1920s, and in particular amongst American tourists. So much so that a free ferry was established that would take Americans all the way from Rochester, New York, and would drop them off here at Hamlin's Point. Does anyone know what was going on in the States during the 1920s that could compel Americans to want to come all the way here to Hamlin's Point in Canada? Exactly, everyone here is so smart. You're right, it was prohibition. In the States during the 1920s, there were a lot of rules and restrictions regarding the sale and the consumption of alcohol. And although here in Canada, we certainly did have our own form of prohibition, we were a little bit more lax. There were 3 ways or loopholes that people found to gain access to alcohol. And the first one was for beer. During the 1920s here in the city of Toronto, we were large producers and manufacturers of beer, and it was a very flourishing industry. And they decided to continue selling it. And although they couldn't sell it to Canadians, you know who they could sell it to? The Americans. So the Americans would come here on the free Rochester, New York ferry to come and drink Canadian beer. Now the second loophole was for wine. During the 1920s, it was allowed for religious ceremonies. So you can imagine that a lot of people became highly religious. They were missing a single Friday night mass. The third and final loophole was for whiskey. At the time, pain medication was not as readily available as it is now. So people will go to their doctors and tell them about their knee aches, their backache, even as far as their heartaches, and they will be prescribed a bottle of Canadian rye whiskey to cure those ailments. In fact, Captain Amalia has confessed to me that she still uses this method to cure her very own heartaches. But if you're looking here to the right, you're probably thinking, what is this Isabel girl going on?
Where's your race? So it's over here. Is that where the
Here on our left, we are seeing Mugs Island. Of the 15 islands, Mugs is the only one that is semi-privately owned. About half of it is reserved for the Island Yacht Club, which is where you see those beautiful boats lining its shorefront. And then the other part of it, coming up ahead here on the left, is a more wilderness side reserved for wildlife conservation. Now, at the Island Yacht Club, they are quite exclusive in the fact that only their members and special city officials are allowed to enter their premises. But I really enjoy the fact that a lot of the members here at the Island Yacht Club have a very fun tradition of naming their boats based on what they used to do for a living. There's one boat out there called Free Reign, owned by a former equestrian. Another one called Chicken Soup 6, owned by the former vice president of Campbell Soup. There's also another one called Perfect Fifth, owned by the former conductor of the Toronto Symphony Orchestra. But I want to play a little bit of a game with you guys where I see the name of a boat and you guys guess what that person did for a living. Now this first boat is easy peasy. I'm sure you guys will get it right away. Turbulence. Turbulence. What did the owner of the Turbulence do for a living? Pilot. Exactly. Easy peasy. I know you guys were a smart crowd. Now this next one is a little bit trickier. It's called Heads or Tails. Heads or Tails. In the past, I've heard casino owner, gambler, even banker, which makes sense, you know, something to do with money, with coins. I've even heard referee, although I don't know if a referee would make enough money to own a yacht personally, but still, a good guess because of the coins and everything. But it was actually owned by a couple, a man and a woman. The woman, she was the head of the Head or Tails, she was a therapist, and the man, the Tails, was a proctologist. Now, my favorite boat is one called the Stress Free. What do you think the owner of the Stress Free did for a living? Therapist, excellent guess. I've heard yoga instructor. In the past, I've heard retired, unemployed, maybe a socialite, a nudist. I haven't heard that one yet, but yeah, good. I mean, why not? Stress free, right? No worries about anything. But those are all not quite right. The owner of the Stress Free was in fact a divorce attorney. Now here on our right, we are seeing the more wilderness side of the Toronto Islands. Although there are technically 15 Toronto Islands in total, only 7 of them are reserved for human activity, and the rest of them, like the ones you see here on the right, are reserved for wildlife conservation. There aren't any footpaths or bridges that connect them to the rest of the islands, so if you did want to explore them, you would either have to kayak or paddleboard there and then explore at your own risk, although I wouldn't recommend it as there are a lot of bushes there, and with those bushes come a lot of ticks, so I would steer clear if possible. What exactly is the wildlife that we are preserving here? Well, for the most part, it is birds. There are over 200 different species here at the Toronto Islands. We have yellow warblers, cardinals, blue jays, egrets, swans, geese, eagles. Honestly, I could go on. We have so many. But there are 2 key species here that are quite notable. And the first one I'm going to talk about are the double-crested cormorants. Now, perhaps you may have noticed those blackbirds flying about in the sky every once in a while as we were coming upon this area, and those are the double-crested cormorants. Now these birds are quite unique in the fact that they don't produce the oil glands necessary to stay afloat of water for prolonged periods of time. This enables them to be able to fish very deep to get their food. Now when you see them in the water, you'll see them just with their necks and their heads popping out and not the rest of their body, and this is because oftentimes they get waterlogged. So when they're done fishing, what they have to do is they have to fly to the very tops of the trees and spread out their wings to dry out their feathers to ensure that they don't get waterlogged. But oftentimes during the process of doing this, they tend to relieve themselves. And this fecal matter gets to the bottoms of the trees and results in them dying and toppling over time. So all the trees that you see here near the shoreline that are kind of fallen over or look like they're dying is unfortunately a result of the double-crested cormorant's poop. Now, because these birds are in this wildlife conservation, area, we can't really do much to control their growing population here, besides shooting off flares every once in a while to control their migration and to ensure that they're not just all congregated in one area. But for the most part, we kind of are stuck with the double-crested cormorant issue. The other bird species that's quite notable here at the Toronto Islands, and I'm sure most of you have encountered them at some point in your lives, are the Canada geese. Now, if you met them before, you know that they're not very Canadian at all. They're loud, they're mean, they're obnoxious, and they're certainly not nice. Well, here at the Toronto Islands, we also have an overpopulation problem with them, but unlike the double-crested cormorants, we've tried 3 main attempts to control the growing population here at the islands. And the first attempt that they made was to essentially find the different goose eggs and put a special gel on them to prevent them from hatching. However, finding these eggs, let alone getting close to them, was a very difficult task, as the mother geese tended to hide them in these bushland areas that you see here to the left. And when city officials got close enough to the eggs, the mother geese, being territorial, tended to attack. So seeing that was becoming a little bit too dangerous, they said, okay, on with the next solution. And this was to give the male Canada geese vasectomies. And this was highly effective, but also highly expensive. It cost about $200 per bird, and then they also had to bring in the right person that was trained to conduct the procedure. And once taxpayers found out this is where their hard-earned money was going, they were quite angry. So seeing that the taxpayers were angry and that it was costing too much money, they said, okay, on with the 1/3 and final solution. And this third solution actually held a lot of promise. It was going to potentially introduce a natural predator of the Canada geese. You may be thinking, what could that be? Maybe foxes or coyotes, which are both valid options. But instead, they opted to introduce the raccoon. Now, in the wild, raccoons are a natural predator of the Canada geese. The city officials did that very well, but they made one small error that turned out to be very detrimental in the long run. And this was that they introduced the sitting raccoon. Now, if you guys know anything about city raccoons, you know that they only consume garbage. They're known here in Toronto as trash pandas, and they have never seen a goose egg in their entire lives. So unfortunately now the islands are plagued with not only a goose problem, but also a raccoon problem. Now this area that we'll be seeing in a couple of moments is known as Center Island. This is definitely the main tourist island and where I recommend you sort out your island experience. Now the reason for this is because if you want things to do here at Center Island is where you will find that. Although the Toronto Islands are very beautiful and scenic, in their essence they're just a giant park space, so all of the basic park activities that you'd be able to do at any other park you could also indulge in here. But at Center Island there are a couple more amenities. There is a hedge maze here, a petting zoo, there's also an amusement park called Centerville Kids Amusement Park. You can rent bikes, kayaks, paddleboards, canoes, and explore the entirety of the island either by land or by water, because they're only about 5 kilometers long for the area reserved for human activity. They also have the quadra bike, so if you want to do it with your family and or your friends, it's definitely a lot of fun to do. And at the very far end of Center Island, there's also a very lovely beach. Now this area that we're coming upon here, where you see that bridge, is part of Center Island, and that is known as Manitou Bridge. Now the origin of this bridge has actually been lost in history. One day it disappeared. The files where it was being constructed, the papers and the blueprints were lost. So we don't know exactly what date it's been. It was instilled here at the Toronto Islands, but it's been here for a while. And those red stands where you see in the distance, those grandstands, are used by watchers as boat races take place on this channel that we're currently on. It's known as Long Pond, and has been artificially outstretched for boat races that occur here during the summer months. Things like the Dragon Boat Festival, there's also the Dominion Day Regatta that takes place on Canada Day, and my favorite is definitely the Viking Festival, where essentially people dress up like Vikings and they sail across this entire channel. It's really fun to watch. Now because we don't have a lot of green space on the city side, especially the downtown core, the islands serve as a great alternative for people to escape the hustle and bustle of the city and spend some time outdoors in nature with their families and loved ones or friends, Oftentimes people come here and take care and have barbecues. So there's some mailbox looking structures near the shoreline that you may have noticed, and those are public barbecue areas where you just bring charcoal and then you can go crazy and barbecue whatever you want. And of course there's also picnic benches where people can dine at and just enjoy time with each other. But now that you've seen more of the Toronto Islands, you're probably thinking, this looks like a very great place to be. I mean, look how lovely and tranquil the water is, the flora, the fauna, and for the most part, it's pretty quiet. There's hardly any noises that are disturbing or annoying. And you're probably thinking if and wondering if there are people that live here. Well, in a couple moments, we'll be seeing the Toronto Island Marina, which is one of the ways that you can live at the Toronto Islands. The Toronto Island Marina is a home to the largest live-aboard community in all of Toronto. There are more than 200 residents that live here in the spring, the summer, and fall. And when I say that these individuals live aboard, I mean that they live aboard either houseboats or on boats. And in a couple moments, we'll be seeing an excellent example of a houseboat. Just behind those trees and that yellow sign, you'll notice a yellow tint structure, and that's a perfect example of a houseboat. It's essentially a home on a floating structure. It doesn't necessarily need an engine or anything. It kind of just remains docked in its docking space. Now, if you're thinking, I don't know how I feel about this, living on a boat, houseboat, maybe it's similar to camping, or you're kind of roughing it a little bit, which is what I initially thought too. But you'd be wrong. They actually have access to all the basic things that you find in a normal city apartment. They have access to water, electricity, gas, and most importantly in today's day and age, Wi-Fi. There's even one boat there in the distance that has a water slide leading out of it. So they're definitely not roughing it by any means. However, there are a couple of pretty major downsides to living here, and the most important one is that it's only a temporary living solution. Everyone that lives here can only live here in the spring, summer, and the fall. Does anyone know why they can't live here during the winter months? Now this is fresh water that we're currently on, and these channels are quite shallow, so during the winters they freeze. Now this ice that forms has a potential to break into the bottoms of the boat, white film that prevents them from being damaged with the harsher and the inclement weather that comes during the winter months. If you guys look into the distance there, you may notice that some boats are still in this winterized state with the white film wrapped around them. Now this black and white boat that we're passing here is actually too heavy for the marine travel lift, so for that one they use something known as the bubbler. It's essentially a device that encircles the boat and keeps the water molecules moving, which prevents the ice from forming during the winter. Now the other downside is that unfortunately there aren't any grocery stores or convenience stores. So let's say you're doing your weekly shopping on the city side, you think you have everything you need, you wake up in the morning afterwards and you're about to make your breakfast and open the fridge and realize, oh shoot, I forgot eggs. That would mean that you need to make the trek all the way back to the city, get what you forgot, your eggs, and then make the trek all the way back here. Now for little things like that, here and there, of course, it could be quite annoying to have to go back and forth so often. Now the last and final downside to living here is that hopefully you don't mind being spoken about. Because every hour, on the hour, all summer long, Captain Amalia and myself come by, and we come and talk about you for the exact same part of the tour, even on your day off when you're trying to relax. So if you don't mind being spoken about, this is definitely an ideal living situation for you. Here up ahead on the right, we'll be seeing the Toronto Island Sailing Club, TISC. This is a sailing club that's available to not only people that live here at the Toronto Islands, but also from the city side as well. They teach people as young as 8 years old all the way to 88 years old how to sail. So if that is something that's been on your bucket list for a while, this is definitely a great starting point for that. Compared to other swimming clubs across the city of Toronto, this one is fairly affordable, and of course, you're learning how to sail here in the Inner Harbor area, which is a very picturesque way to learn. So that's something that you've always wanted to do. This is a great starting point. Our rather than reinvest in this already dying entertainment district, the City of Toronto are the two instead to turn into the very lovely park space that we have here to the right. If you look there in the distance, you may notice perched upon that branch an egret. It's one of the species of birds that we have here at the Toronto Islands. And coming up ahead here, you may notice that wall with a bunch of boats moored on top, and that is a mooring wall. It is the only way that you can stay at the island here overnight and enjoy your stay. Depending on the length of your boat, you can pay a certain fee. It's typically around $40 to $50 a night, and you can dock your boat there and spend a couple of nights here at the Toronto Islands. There's some yellow kind of port things near the shoreline, and this is the way that they charge their devices for electricity, which is pretty cool. Another thing that remains here at the Toronto Islands is that here at Hamilton Point in particular, is that it is a home of Canada's only clothing optional beach. Now, so a couple of you turn your head there to the right. This is a PG tour. You won't be seeing any of that. It's on the other side of Hamilton Point. But if you do have any questions, be sure to ask Captain Amalia. She's there every single day after work. Now in a couple moments here, the captain will be pivoting us and you'll be seeing the very lovely Toronto City skyline on the left side of the boat. I'll give you guys a brief break by voice, but take this opportunity to take pictures, walk around if you need to, stretch your legs, and I'll hop back in the mic in a couple of moments to resume your tour. Rather than reinvest in this already dying entertainment district, the City of Toronto are the two instead to turn into the very lovely park space that we have here to the right. If you look there in the distance, you may notice perched upon that branch an egret. It's one of the species of birds that we have here at the Toronto Islands. And coming up ahead here, you may notice that wall with a bunch of boats moored on top, and that is a mooring wall. It is the only way that you can stay at the island here overnight and enjoy your stay. Depending on the length of your boat, you can pay a certain fee. It's typically around $40 to $50 a night, and you can dock your boat there and spend a couple of nights here at the Toronto Islands. There's some yellow kind of port things near the shoreline, and this is the way that they charge their devices for electricity, which is pretty cool. Another thing that remains here at the Toronto Islands is that here at Hamilton Point in particular, is that it is a home of Canada's only clothing optional beach. Now, so a couple of you turn your head there to the right. This is a PG tour. You won't be seeing any of that. It's on the other side of Hamilton Point. But if you do have any questions, be sure to ask Captain Amalia. She's there every single day after work. In a couple moments, we'll be exiting this island territory and we'll be re-entering the Toronto Inner Harbor. Whereupon Amalia here, Captain Amalia, is going to take a sharp turn to the right and expose the entire left side of the boat once more to the very lovely Toronto City skyline. But before I hop off the mic and give you guys a break for my voice to take more pictures and enjoy the very beautiful sights, I do want to point out up ahead here on the left side of the boat that we'll be seeing a mute swan. This is one of two species of swans that lives here at the Toronto Islands. And trailing behind the mute swan, you'll notice some cygnets. Although they're definitely more at their adolescent stage, they're soon blossom and become just like their mothers, so some baby swans. Pretty cool sight to behold, honestly. In a couple of weeks, they'll be starting to shed those gray feathers and they'll turn into swans just like their mother. There they are on the right. Alright guys, enjoy the views, enjoy the breeze. I'll hop back on the mic in a couple of minutes to resume the tour and talk about our icon, of course, that is the CN Tower. See you soon. So I was just asked what that white house there is in the distance. That is the RCYC, the Royal Canadian Yacht Club. It's one of the oldest yacht clubs here in the city of Toronto, and you actually have to be invited to be part of it, which is pretty prestigious. Of the yacht clubs at the islands, it's definitely the most prestigious one. The other one that we saw was the Island Yacht Club, of course, and then there on the easternmost side, you may see another white house in the distance, and that's the Queen City Yacht Club, which is another one of the yacht clubs. It's a little bit more affordable compared to the other ones, but yeah, the RCYC that you see here directly on our right is very, very prestigious. Black boat that you see up ahead here, that tall ship is called the Kiyama, and they essentially do charter boat rides, and they have like a restaurant and a bar on boat, and you just kind of get to enjoy the sights. They go out into the outer harbor, which is right there on our right. That's called the Eastern Gap, and from there boats depart and enter the rest of Lake Ontario. So right now we're in this inner harbor area, which is only a fraction of the rest of Lake Ontario, but if you go to the other side of the Toronto Islands, then you have the vastness of the rest of it. And although you see the sails up, it's currently not under sailed. It's actually still being powered by motor. But I hope you guys all enjoyed that little brief break of my voice, but I am now back, and I'm back to talk about the icon of our skyline that you see there, and I probably have taken lots of pictures of the CN Tower. At one point in its history, the CN Tower was the tallest man-made freestanding structure in the entire world, measuring 553 meters tall. However, in 2009, the Burj Khalifa in Dubai overtook that title because that one measures more than 800 meters. So almost twice the size of the CN Tower, if you guys can imagine that. There are two main ways to get to the very top. You can either take the stairs, all 1,776 steps, or you can simply take my preferred route, which is just to take one of the high-speed elevators all the way to the top in under 2 minutes. Now, in the past, people would opt to take the stairs in order to waive the fee associated with the elevators. They would say, a fee? I'm not paying a fee. 1,776 steps? Easy peasy, no problem. And what they would do is that they would start walking and walking and walking, and about midway through, they would realize there aren't any windows, there aren't any washrooms, and there aren't any places to sit down. And these people, they would panic. Now, when they would panic, they would call the fire department, and because there was no other way to access them, the fire department would be forced to walk up the very same steps, walk, 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 take that person up, and then walk them all the way back down. You can imagine that after a couple of these calls, the fire department and the CN Tower were not on the best of terms, so since then, the stairs have been permanently closed to the public, and now they're only opened every once in a while for special charity events called step-a-thons. But besides that, you do have to take the elevators. But what exactly is so cool about the top of the CN Tower that could compel people to try to get all the way to the top using the stairs? Well, at the very top, there is a 360 observation deck that gives you a 360 view of the city of Toronto, unlike in any other building. And there's also a 360 restaurant. Now, when I see that this is a 360 restaurant, I not only mean that you have a 360 view of the city of Toronto, I mean that it actually rotates 360 degrees. So that means if you decide to dine there, slowly throughout that dining journey, you'll start rotating and rotating and rotating, and after about a 45 minutes, 50-minute mark, which is the average time it takes to consume a meal there, you'll end up right back where you first started your dining adventure. Now, I do caution you though, if you decide to dine there and for whatever reason you need to use a restroom at some point during the dining experience, be wary as when you return, your table may be at a different position of the restaurant, so do be aware of that. Do we have any thrill seekers on board? Anyone who loves a good thrill? No? Then you guys are just like me. A couple of years ago, they introduced a very thrilling attraction at the CN Tower known as the Edgewalk. This is essentially where you can walk along the perimeter of it, suspended by a harness, and you can look down all the way below you. And this is too scary for me, but if you love a good thrill, definitely something worth checking out. Now, you may look at the very top of the CN Tower just now, and there's kind of like a gate-like area near the top. Well, that area is where the Edgewalk experience takes place. I don't currently see them at the moment, but if you're ever walking around the city and you look up at the CN Tower, you may notice individuals wearing orange jumpsuits, and those are the brave souls taking the Edgewalk experience. Now, although the CN Tower is no longer the tallest freestanding structure in the entire world, people have still set some records on it. And the first one I'm going to talk about was set by a man named Brendan Kenoy, with the fastest time getting all the way to the top using the stairs. Now, I'm going to remind you all, there are 1,776 steps. How long do you think it took him to get all the way to the top using the stairs in the fastest time? 6 minutes? 10 minutes? You guys are actually right on the money. It took him 7 minutes and 52 seconds to get all the way to the top of the 1,776 steps. Now, personally, I found this very hard to believe. So I did a little bit of research, and it turns out that Brendan Kenoy was a volunteer firefighter, and he was also very tall, around 6'7". So on his way to the top, he definitely skipped a couple of steps. Now, this other record was set by a man who said, okay, you know what? I'm going to flip it on its head. Brendan Kenoy, you can have the fastest time getting all the way to the top using the stairs. I'm going to have the fastest time getting all the way down. And what this person did is that he took one of the high-speed elevators all the way to the top of the CN Tower, stood atop of the stairs, wrapped himself up in bubble wrap, and simply descended. Now, he's said to have suffered some brain injuries, but who knows, he may have had some before he embarked on that challenge. Right here on our right, we are passing the Jack Layton Ferry Terminal, where you see those white boats. The Jack Layton Ferry Terminal and the ferries that come from it are the main way to go to the Toronto Islands. And these ferries can take you to 3 main spots. They can take you to the westernmost side, which is Hamlin's Point, where we first started our tour, where the naked beaches. The other spot they can take you to is Center Island. There on our left, you may notice a brown hut in the distance. That is the area where they drop you off at. And the last place they can take you is the easternmost side, where we saw the Queen City Yacht Club, that smaller white house in the distance, more of a residential area. Although the ferries are definitely the main way, you may have noticed those smaller rectangular looking boats going speedily through the water, and these are the water taxis. They can take you over to the islands in under 6 minutes. It's a very quick and efficient ride, and if you don't want to wait for the line on the ferry, it's a great alternative. It's only about $1 or $2 more than the ferry price. Now, oftentimes during our tours, people wonder what this weird looking spherical concrete structure is coming up on the right. Is it a Pokeball? Is it a Death Star? Is it a dumpling? Well, it is actually none of these things. It's a piece of modern art. During the 1990s, there was a modern art competition, and out of 145 different submissions, what we see here on our right was declared to be the winner. It makes you wonder what the other ones look like. But what exactly is this piece of modern art trying to be? Well, it's supposed to be a sundial, and it's actually quite interactive. What you do is you walk up that side ramp, walk, stand right in the middle of it, stick out your arm right in front of you and point it in the direction of the sun, rotate it about 90 degrees towards yourself, and then rotate your wrist about 30 degrees towards yourself and look down at your watch, because unfortunately this sundial does not work. They built it wrong. It's called Sundial's Folly, and it certainly cannot tell us the time. However, one thing it does let us know is that our tour has come to an end.